Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Roshan Muhammed Salih here, the editor of Five Pillars, and welcome to The Big Picture, which I haven't done in several months. But this is our special end of year show, Muslim Review of the Year 2021. And we'll basically, over the next hour to an hour and a half, we'll be looking at the major Muslim news stories at home and abroad in 2021. So abroad, obviously, I think the biggest Muslim news story of 2021 is Afghanistan and the Americans, alhamdulillah, being kicked out of Afghanistan. But we've also had the crackdown on Muslims in places such as China, India, closer to home, France, and other places. We've had the Gulf countries like Bahrain and the UAE continuing their treacherous normalization process with the Zionist entity of Israel. We've had unbelievable things happening in Saudi Arabia, the westernization process in Saudi Arabia. We've had, hundreds of thousands of people singing and dancing in the desert near Riyadh just the other day in front of the Shahada, astaghfirullah. At home, obviously, headlines dominated by COVID once again. And of course, Muslims completely divided over this issue. I personally tend to duck it because it's so divided, but maybe we'll touch on it a little bit later in the program. We've had a crackdown on pro-Palestine activism in schools and in public spaces generally. We've had Muslims falling out of love, thank God, with the Labour Party and deserting the Labour Party in droves, finally. A good news story, the closing down, Allahu Akbar, of the Quilliam Foundation, which caused so much harm to the community over so many years, but alhamdulillah, it's dead and buried, and it's in its grave, and no one is going to be missing it whatsoever. So in terms of the guests we've got a bit of a cracking lineup, to be honest. We've got Dilly Hussain, who needs no introduction. I'll be bringing on Dilly in a few minutes' time, the deputy editor of Five Pillars, and of course the presenter of the Blood Brothers podcast. We've got Mohammed Hijab, fresh from his monumental debate with Jordan Peterson, which I've just seen. I didn't watch it myself, but I think it's got millions of views online. So we'll be touching on that with Mohammed. We have Robert Carter, who's an up-and-coming journalist and YouTuber and TikToker with millions of views on TikTok, especially. And we have Moazzam Begg, who again needs no introduction. I'll be introduced. Moazzam will be joining us in about half an hour's time. Keep your questions coming in, brothers and sisters. Your comments, I'll endeavor to read out as many as possible or just flash them up. Please keep them clean. Please try maybe to avoid talking to each other on the wall so that I can find the genuine, kind of comments which contribute to the discussion and the questions for the guests, and inshallah they'll respond to them. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on our first guest, who is Dilly Hussain. Let me just get this. Yeah, that's nicer. Assalamu alaikum, Dilly. How you doing, brother?
Assalamu alaikum, Roshan. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, alhamdulillah. So let me, for those of you who don't know him, let me just introduce him really briefly. So Dilly Hussain, obviously deputy editor of Five Pillars for the last 8 years now, I think it is. But also the presenter and creator and founder of the greatest Muslim podcast in the world, as you modestly describe it, Blood Brothers. How's it going?
I've actually used those terms to describe the podcast.
Yes, you have. You do it without with a straight face. You look at me straight in the eye with a straight face, without a hint of irony. You call it the best Muslim podcast in the world.
Okay, let me rephrase it. One of the best Muslim podcasts out there, anyway. Alhamdulillah.
So, Dilly, what's been your kind of highlights and lowlights of 2021?
So I've got 3 stories which kind of stand out for me in the last Gregorian year. Of course, Afghanistan and the takeover of the Taliban or the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and the end of a brutal 20-year occupation. I think obviously this story is very personal to us because obviously you flew out there for nearly 3 weeks or a bit longer. I think the racism scandal in Yorkshire County Cricket and generally what's coming up now across county cricket is a huge story, because whilst the entire framing of these scandals have been around race, when you actually look at the individual cases, a lot of these racist attacks or experiences are very much grounded in Islamophobic and anti-Muslim stereotypes and tropes. I think that's a huge story. Even the fact that England had an embarrassing defeat against the Australians in the recent Ashes. I think it's been a crazy year for English cricket as a whole, and has kind of exposed the racist and Islamophobic underbelly of cricket at such a high level. And the third story which stands out for me, of course, is yet another siege of Gaza, but in a very different context, because it was linked to what was happening in Sheikh Jarrah. It was linked to the continuous transgression by the Zionists and their colonial settlers against Masjid al-Aqsa, which then resulted in yet another attack on the besieged Muslims of Gaza during the last 10 days of Ramadan. And of course, one last other story that stands out to me also is at home is the Nationality and Borders Bill, the Clause 9. The fact that the British government is speeding through an amendment on a law which will allow them to revoke people's citizenship without notification. Now, if we're to be brutally honest, this policy will only really affect Muslims and people of color or people of immigrant descent. So I think those are the kind of stories that stand out to me. But there's lots to discuss and lots have happened this year.
Yeah, I think all your stories are really important. I think, unfortunately, the borders thing, it's just not a sexy story, is it? Like not. Afghanistan was. And it's hard. I find it's quite hard to engage with people on that story. It's like Prevent, isn't it? It's kind of like...
I mean, if you were to ask the Muslim community, how important is it for us to be on the pulse with things like Prevent or the various CVE policies and the counter-terrorism security industry, which we, as in the Muslim community, are the number one targets of, they'll agree that it's an important thing that we need to keep an eye on. But in terms of people engaging with the story, it's something that we found over the course of 8 years. It's not a popular type of story, though it affects adversely and has been for the last 20 years.
And I must admit, I haven't engaged too deeply with the racism story. Basically, I'll be honest, it's because I asked the brother, what's his name? Rafiq, or what was his name?
Azim Rafiq.
Yeah, I asked him for an interview and he wouldn't give us an interview. I don't know why. He gave everyone else an interview. So from that, I kind of went off the story, but I know that I should put my personal kind of prejudices aside and look at the wider issue. But I didn't engage with it too much for that. But it's a huge issue. And you love your sport, don't you? You're into your sport. And weren't you a cricketer at one point?
Yes, I did. I come from a cricketing family. My older brother, Mohammed Hijab, played at county level cricket right up until his early 20s, late teens. He played for Bedfordshire County, had trials with Derbyshire, North Hants, Essex. My brother was offered a position in the first Bangladeshi team before they had their ICC license. I myself played for Bedfordshire County from the age of 14, 15, 16. So this story it stood out to me because we experienced racism, because cricket is a very upper middle class sport, which generally is played by boys that go to private schools or very overachieving village towny type schools. But obviously our socioeconomic situation was very different. We came from Bedford, where there was a sizable Muslim/South Asian community. When I used to play cricket, all my cousins, my friends, my family would turn up. My white peers would be somewhat intimidated by this. They would barely get their girlfriend or their parents to come along, whereas I would consistently have at least 10, 15 people turning up to every game I played. That itself was somewhat intimidating. But the changing room banter, the such ease at which the word Paki comes out, or Muslim comes out. This is just changing room banter. Even the fact that I'm telling you that when I played at county level cricket, even something as small as when it comes to the changing rooms, generally speaking, observant Muslims would not totally become naked to go into the shower. We would cover our aura. But this was something that would become changing room banter, that the Muslim player wouldn't fully be naked to shower with his fellow peers, which is something that's normal. It was absolutely normal to go out for a drink up after a good win. So a lot of these things, very much normal, has been going on for years. And the Azim Rafiq case just kind of, again, opened up a Pandora's box of all the other cases.
Shouldn't we as Muslims now be more confident in dealing with it and talking back, even striking back, quite frankly? Azim didn't seem to do that. And then I saw him crying in Parliament. And I was thinking, this is not how we should react. We shouldn't we should be tougher than this. And I know people are going to disagree with me, but that was my immediate reaction. This is not how we should be reacting, bottling inside and then going on TV and crying about it.
I mean, look, I mean, in his defense, it would take us, it would take you and I and many others to understand the full trauma of what he's experienced. And I know this concept of trauma is something that's overplayed at times to get the sympathy card. But I agree with you on the perspective that if he and others would have stood up from the very onset,
absolutely,
and based a very clear red line, because I'm telling you right now, when I played with some of my peers who actually follow my work, they'll know that whenever I played with them at the very beginning, I said, look, guys, if you guys don't like Asians or Muslims, you guys like having packy jokes, at least have the decency not to do it in front of me. Yeah? I can sit here and crack bacon eating jokes and dog licking jokes, but we don't. We respect each other. At least pretend not to be racist. And they respected that. They respected that. And then once or twice they slipped up, I chuck it back. But it's fair to say that maybe Azim, Rafiq and others didn't have that level of support from friends and family and the community. Maybe they didn't have 10, 15 friends and family members who turn up to every cricket match, because that's a very hard thing to sustain if you think about it, Roshan, To have a crowd of 10, 15 following you on Sunday or currently, it's a big ask.
And he probably just wanted to fit in, didn't he, and not be sacked or whatever.
And Azim Rafiq even said he started drinking alcohol to fit in, something he regrets. So I think when you look at all of these cases, even the ones that come from Essex and Blackburn, things related to prayer mats and bacon and being forced to drink alcohol, these are things which are clearly linked to the Muslim Islamic identity. People know that bacon is haram for us. People know that drinking alcohol is haram for us. People know that we have to pray. People know we have the concept of haya and not being naked. So these things, is brought into the front stage, the limelight, how systemic this issue is and how normalized it is. But I really wish if aspiring sports figures in our Muslim community, especially the youth, please do not compromise your Islamic values and identity in the hope that you will be accepted and your career will prosper. We have said this, you and I have said this from the very beginning, whichever industry and career path you want to pursue, if it happens to be mainstream, rest assured that you will experience two things. Number one, you will experience opposition to you truly expressing your religious values and morals. And secondly, there will be a point at which you will either feel a sense of discomfort or compromise on your Islamic values. This is something that you have signed up to when you pursue a career in the mainstream. So just keep that in mind. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, Dilly. It's just that I think in a few minutes' time we're going to get Mohammed Hijab on. So I just thought we don't want to go too deep into the discussion, because inshallah we'll be doing that a bit later on in the show. And maybe we'll take a few questions and comments before we get brother Mohammed on. I mean, in terms of just really briefly, in terms of my highlights, lowlights from the year, I would just say that Afghanistan for me was the highlight. I think it was the biggest Muslim story of 2021. Full stop. But obviously, because I went there, it has a kind of a personal resonance for me. I think France, a place I used to live in, again, the absolute fascism that France has descended into. India, I know you've been following the Indian story very closely. We'll get onto that later. I think shrinking spaces in the UK as well. People like me and you who are mainstream within the Muslim community, we just literally don't get a look in the wider community. We're like persona non grata. And that's not just us, but it's generally kind of mainstream Muslim activists. Unless you say God save the Queen and kiss the flag, then you can't get on TV, you can't get in the mainstream, you're nobody. And I think that's a dangerous situation when the wider majority community cannot engage with, mainstream Muslims anymore. So we'll expand on all of that later on in the show, inshallah. In terms of comments, let's take a few. This is an interesting one. So 786 Nath is saying, why can't we have super chats? If you had super chats, supporters could help your channel financially. Do you know what these are, Dilly? Super chats?
No, it sounds like chatting, but a lot of it, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just a way to do a live stream. I can see brother Mohammed backstage. Inshallah, I'll get you on in a few minutes, Mohammed. I think it's just a way that, when you're live streaming, you can earn a bit of cash as well, and people can give you 10 quid here, 5 quid there while they're listening. I know that Afghan Eye and other podcasts do that. So I think we should do it. I think I should do it on the big picture. Thanks for that suggestion, 786 Nath. I'll skip all the Assalamu Alaikum, brothers and sisters, if that's okay with you. Umar Sheikh, what do you think about the major challenges for Muslims in the UK in the next year? We'll get onto that. We won't answer that now, but we will answer it during the course of the show. If you want to help find it, sorry, I'm not trying to like grab your money, but I'm just like showcasing all the financial tweets here. If you want to help find 5 Pillars financially, you can make a donation directly to their website, and they'll get the full amount as opposed to a percentage only through Super Chat. Absolutely. What does Brother Dilly feel or suspect will occur towards the Uyghur and Palestinian causes in 2022? Again, we're going to address that later on the show, so I'm not going to ask him now. And I think a lot of the questions and comments, and already, alhamdulillah, we've got loads, but they're in the kind of same vein of things that we're going to address later on. Ryad says Azim has tried to fit in and was still not accepted. Brother Mohammed Hijab has just left for the moment. I'll let him I'll continue with the comments until he rejoins, inshallah. What's your view on UAE being friendly with Turkey? Reminds me of saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. For the moment, I think I'm just going to read out the comments, Dilly. We won't respond to them while Mohammed reconnects. Amina, what is your perspective on socioeconomics? Do you think it plays a big part in how people are treated when it comes to equality, racism, and opportunities? Salma, what about the Saudis bringing Christmas in Mecca and Medina and the worst celebrating Christmas in the Muslim world and making it look normal? And I'll take 2 more before we introduce our guest, inshallah, who's just trying to rejoin but is having some problems. May Allah reward you, Ustad Roshan, for your report from Afghanistan. Jazakallah khair.
How often do you get called Ustad, Roshan?
Never. That's the first time ever. Normally it's like much worse than that. Why can't Saudi Arabia stop the assault on Yemen? It's the same kind of mockery to some Muslims around the world. From Ahmed from Freetown in Africa. Is that Sierra Leone, Freetown?
I believe so.
Sure.
Yeah, I believe so.
Alhamdulillah. Got a viewer from Sierra Leone. Ansel says, did you hear about the imam who got hung in Saudi for speaking against normalization of ties with Israel? A long one here. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I'm from Port Elizabeth. I think that's in South Africa, right? No, Elizabeth Richmond Hill. I'm not sure what that is. I want to inform Muslims, brothers and sisters.
This is one of those fundraising ones, Roshan. Let's skip this
one. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. We've got Mohammed on now. So let me finish with the comments and inshallah bring on. Well, it's not Mohammed, it's somebody else. That's a familiar face.
Oh, it's Smalti Jannah. It's Ishan as well. It's the whole gang.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. How you doing, brother Mohammed? How you doing?
Okay, brother?
1 second.
Oh,
right.
How you doing, Mohammed? You okay, Hijab?
Yeah, thanks. Salam. How you doing? You're right.
Shall I introduce you? Shall I introduce you first? I got a bit of an intro from Wikipedia. So I'll read it out.
I don't think we need an introduction. I mean, the people should know by now.
Well, I will introduce Dilly, so I'm going to introduce you. All right, so Mohammed Hijab, British Egyptian author, theological historian, public speaker, debater, comparative religionist. He's the co-founder of the Sapience Institute, a frequent speaker at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park in London. Now, I've got to confess, Mohammed, we've actually never been introduced. I saw you a few times in Crown House when we shared an office, but I must admit, I'm a bit of a surly kind of character, and I don't go up to strangers and introduce myself, so I apologize for that. But I do know you, and I do know your work, and pleasure having you on.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Good job.
And I'm gonna pass you on to Dilly now, because we're gonna kick this off with your podcast with Jordan Peterson. And the reason why I'm not going to ask you a question is because I'm the only Muslim in the world that hasn't actually watched it. And I haven't watched it because I watched Jordan Peterson a few times. Sorry, I'm going to offend you here straight away, right from the bat. But I watched Jordan Peterson a few times and I just don't get the guy. And I just don't get why anyone would be interested in the guy. But obviously your discussion with him has had like 2 million views or more. So I'll pass you on to Dilly because I know you watched it and you're a big fan.
A big fan of what? Mohammed Hijab?
I don't know. Mohammed Hijab, the podcast, Jordan Peterson.
The discussion itself. He's my brother. He's my dear friend. Hijab, assalamu alaikum.
Assalam, how you doing, man? You okay?
Yeah. So look, let's quickly, when we were talking about the milestone events and headlines of Muslim-related stories this year, I suggested the podcast you did with Dr. Peterson. And Roshan questioned, he goes, how is that a headline of this year? I said, in the realm of Islamic discourse and dialogue and non-Muslim and Muslim interaction, it is. I believe it was a milestone discussion. Jordan Peterson is someone, whether we like it or not, is someone who is revered by millions, especially North America and Australia and South Africa. He's someone who's seen as an integral figure in what is referred to commonly as the culture wars. Wrongly or rightfully, he's been accused of being a figure associated with the alt-right, something which he consistently has denied. So yeah, I think your conversation and the journey in how the conversation came about and how it was organized and how it nearly didn't happen on 2 occasions.
So you were part of that journey, I think, Dilly.
We were, yes, we were part of that journey. But tell me quickly, first and foremost, the strategic value of that conversation with Dr. Peterson.
I think that question kind of answers it almost itself. I mean, as Roshan, Mr. Roshan has rightfully said, it's first of all, it's had lots of views in a very short space of time. In fact, it's one of the most viewed podcasts on his whole channel. It's, I think, number 5 or number 6 on the list. And I think it's the most commented on video that he's ever done on his channel. So already it's breaking records in a very short space of time. And this is probably one of the most, if not the most popular academic in the West, actually, in terms of social media influence. And so obviously engaging him, especially on points where there has been comments that he's made in the past that have been anti-Islamic or whatever, where he can clarify those things. And as you saw, he did, was one of the very important strategic objective, allowed us to explain what Islam is on a basic level and also make clarifications, because these things actually have impacts on policy making. I think people listen to Jordan Peterson from all the way through the Senate to university students. And so he's got a massive influence, no doubt, and engaging him on Islam, having a discussion with him which is civil and amicable, which also met the objectives, because we've got to think about what objectives it met. It met the objectives of creating bridges, building bridges between the traditionalist Muslim camp and people in the West, whoever they may be, who are not maybe even sympathetic with that kind of thing. I think. Would
you say he was your biggest non-Muslim guest or host that you've engaged with thus far today?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I don't think it wasn't the most. I would still say the David Wood debate was probably more, in terms of my own development, was probably more impactful and more of a turning point. And don't forget, because that was physical and that was in New York and there was thousands of people in attendance, I still think that was number one. But this, in terms of the caliber of interlocutor in this case, then no doubt Jordan Peterson is ranked number one. Now,
you also announced not too long ago that there is another interesting and dubious character of great prominence that you're going to be engaging soon, and that's Ayaan Ali Hirsi, the very prominent ex-Muslim, very closely aligned with the neocons and the Tea Party movement and all types of far-right elements across the Western world. Has that taken place already, or is that in the pipeline?
It has been rescheduled. Actually, it's been rescheduled many, many times, but it has been rescheduled for this month. So it will be recorded, hopefully, on the 24th of this month. It will be recorded on the 24th of this month. It should have been recorded last month. Oh, sorry, not this month. I mean January, because we're still in December, right? Yeah, so it will be recorded 24th of January, because it was meant to be recorded last month, but there was, from Ayaan Hirsi's, actually her real name is Ayaan McGann. From Ayaan McGann's side, she has, she made excuses and technical issues and so on, whatever. And this is like the 3rd or 4th time she's had to reschedule as well. So we'll be doing it on the 24th of January.
Okay, so just before we move on to Gaza and Israel and how it affected some of the events and community cohesion issues here, one could argue of late, you've been calling out Douglas Murray, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Not too long ago, you called out Majid on Twitter, Majid Nawaz.
Her name is actually Ayaan McGann. That is actually her name. Okay, she lied about what her name is. She's saying that her name is Ayaan Hirsi Ali. That's That's a lie. That's not her name. It's one of the lies that she concocted in order to get into her country, into the West, into Holland. So I think it's more befitting if we use that name. In fact, the word, ironically, in Somali language, the word Magan means refugee. I mean, so you can alternatively call it Ayan refugee.
Okay, but so one could argue that you're now kind of calling out people who enjoy the ear and the attention of policymakers. Formerly, it was academics, online people, online figures, Christian apologists, atheists. You're now kind of moving towards people who aren't necessarily known for having huge followership. Like Douglas Murray doesn't have a huge following. Ayan Magan doesn't have a big following. Some of these people now, these are people who are very influential in the kind of neocon, anti-Islamophobia industry. What is this? Is this kind of a strategic redirection to kind of bring these people into the debating platform?
A lot of these people make claims about Islam, theological claims, religious claims, and they sometimes make a claim about Muslims, but to use it as a pathway of attacking Islam itself. So this is where my main interest lies. I think that obviously other things are important, but it's more of your remit, I would say, more of like a journalistic remit to expose how they misappropriated the discourses with their particular improprieties and so on. But for me, the main concern really is how this has an impact on the religious discourse, how people see Islam. Of course, how people see Muslims is closely connected to how people see Islam sometimes. And to that extent, obviously, I'm interested in it as well.
Okay. Now, we experienced and witnessed the very unfortunate events earlier on in the year, around about April, May, went into June. The events of the land theft in Sheikh Jarrah, the neighborhood in East Jerusalem. We saw the subsequent transgression by the Zionists against Masjid al-Aqsa, and then, of course, the events that then followed with yet another military bombardment of Gaza, a brutal one, of which innocent children, women, and elderly were the vast majority of the victims. Your views on how that specific event resulted in yourself, Zishan, and Ali, one of the biggest Muslim YouTubers to go to Golders Green, a predominantly Jewish area, to go and engage with that community about the events that was taking place, which had a huge blowback as well. Blowback in terms of the fact that it was discussed for days and weeks that followed.
I'm happy that happened. Just to let you know, I think that so-called blowback actually raised attention to the entire cause. I think that especially the Jewish Chronicle, a newspaper which has elements in it, or if I'm not sure, you can correct me, is highly Zionistic, paper, or at least these journalists within it are extremely pro-Israel Zionists who are trying their best to try and label, and in this culture of censoriousness that they've created for themselves, people as anti-Semites, even though they haven't called me one officially, using all the terms that they can to try and indicate or to try and portray me in a certain manner. I don't care. I actually sent them a message. They asked me for their opinion recently, Jewish Chronicle, and I sent them a message. I can read it out to you. Would you like me to read it? They didn't put it up on the paper. They recently published four articles, right, with me on it, with my chest out and my body and this kind of things. And so, and maybe they thought I would feel embarrassed, but I have no qualms with such thing. They can put it there. The Jewish women can look at it. The Muslim, I don't mind who looks at it from their community. The young men, all of this and that. They can all look at it. That's fine. I have no qualms with such thing. What I will say is that they keep referring to me as the we love death activist, which I don't think is any problem. We love martyrdom. It's true. It's part of our theology. We believe shaheed. I think they think it's pejorative that we as Muslims have a concept of martyrdom, just like Catholics do. Because that concept is theologically, it's not really a Jewish concept, by the way.
The trip to Golders Green. Talk to me about the thinking behind the trip to Golders Green.
We went to Golders Green, went to different places. Golders Green was one of the places we went to because we have friends in Golders Green and Stamford Hill and others that are pro-Palestine Jewish people. In fact, they were joining hands with us in many of the videos that you can see online, joining hands with us and against this Zionistic regime. But you know what they've done? They've created a discourse where they've made such people, self-hating people, the impossible subject. In fact, I've even seen articles, some of which will indicate that they refer to Jews now as anti-Semites. Actual Jews, they refer to them as anti-Semitic.
Yeah, of course, that's standard.
It's a preposterous discourse. And it's laughable. It doesn't do anything. To me, when I see them squirm in that manner, such that they produce in a span of 2 or 3 days after the event, 4 different articles talking about how, I went into Golders Green, an area with some level of Jewish people. It's not really, I don't even think it's a Jewish majority area. I mean, how much of a proportion of people living in Golders Green are Jewish? Maybe 20%. Is that what they see as a Jewish area? It's as if, honestly, I feel from this whole thing, it's as if they own that. It's their house. As if I've come into their house, and as if I've come into their house uninvited and done things that it's not their house. It's a free country. It's an absolutely free country.
Just on the comment of house, house, and related to this incident that was taking place in Gaza and in Sham, was obviously Ajmal Nahim, a gentleman commonly known as Mufti Abu Layth, who a clip of his went round about perhaps the Palestinians should leave and give Al-Aqsa to the Zionists. That will prevent bloodshed, and then some individuals wrongly and criminally went and transgressed his property and smashed the windows up and stuff, and he posted a status trying to link it to you. Some clarity on this matter.
I think that's illegitimate, and I think that really, if that's the way that one wants to do something, then it's really fallacious manner of doing something. Just because there's a correlation doesn't mean there's a causation. I haven't called these people that went to his house and done what they done to tell them to do what they did. It's absolutely ridiculous, and they didn't even cite me as an influence. So this is nonsense. Just because an event happened in a timeline in a certain way doesn't mean that one caused or A caused B. But really, look at his numbers now. Look at his YouTube channel now. After I released that video, he's basically been cancelled, just like many before him who have come with anti-normative views, and they've attempted to fool and dupe the Muslim community. After I made a video which I did in my bedroom, with a unplanned video that I'd done, which got 200,000-300,000 views, more than probably any video that he's ever released in his life, because it had the barakah of Allah on it, which is something that he doesn't have, because he's a deviant. He's an absolute deviant and a heretic. And because of this, or probably not even a Muslim, I'm not sure if he's repented or not from his kufr. But someone like this, whose Islam is totally questionable, and who's made kufri statements left, right, and center. So an individual like that, after he's been playing around with the Muslim community, leading people astray for so many years, after one video, just look at the numbers of his videos. It's completely declined to a point of almost like he's irrelevant now. People, when they look at him, he used to be a kind of like a somewhat of a figure in the Muslim community. Now he's nothing. Like Hassanat that came before him, like Dino Tokyo, who also were cancelled when after they were dealt with by Ali Dawa and others. So these people, when they play around with the Muslim community, alhamdulillah, they get cancelled. They practically get cancelled, and they become irrelevant fixtures, appendix.
Roshan, do you think hijab and these lot would make a good Western online ministry of vice and virtue kind of thing?
I was going for that job.
The online
look, I'd like to ask Mohammed a question actually, because I must admit, Mohammed, when you went down Golders Green, it was obviously quite a big discussion on the, even the 5 Pillars forums, and most people thought it was the wrong thing to do. From my perspective, it is very worrying that, the fact is, let's call a spade here. The vast majority of British Jews support Israel. We're looking at 80% now, 80%. Either they're hardcore supporters, or they're kind of, so-called moderate supporters, but they're all Zionists at the end of the day.
No, Roshan, just for journalistic clarity, I think what would be more accurate to say is that there is a spectrum of Jews, British Jews. The vast majority believe in the existence and the survival and the advancement of the Israeli
entity. Makes them Zionists. That makes them Zionists. And you get 20% who might be anti-Zionist or kind of, or maybe less than that. But I do know a lot. Personally, I do know a lot of Jews who are anti-Zionist. So we got to give them that platform.
A little bit. I've seen some figures that show like 71%.
So it's high. It's very high.
But just
as well. Yeah. And by the way, these surveys, by the way, I think they're limited as well. Like if you look at the sample groups, usually 1,000 people being sampled or something. So we do have to take this kind of thing with a pinch of salt.
But anyway, from a kind of tactical point of view, because we know that there's like a campaign to call us all anti-Semitic, it just seemed like a bad move to go down Golders Green, because it looked as if you guys were trying to portray all Jews as, being basically complicit in Israel's murderous actions. So I can understand why you did it, but tactically, it didn't seem like a great move.
I see what you're saying, but that particular move that was bad, and it did get some backlash, but it got more coverage than anything that any Muslim news agents, including 5 Pillars, have ever done for Israel. So I think we should also be taking notes about how we've done things, and we should go together next time. We should go Golders Green with us.
Okay, listen.
Because this is the kind of thing
you just dare me to do something provocative now.
We need to learn from these activists, because the thing is, if we're just going to say behind the keyboard and be scared that people are going to label us, we're not going to get anything done. I think that this showed us the weak point. When you hit somebody and they scream, we know to hit them again in the same place and in the same manner. Yeah. So if they're screaming now because I hit them one time, it's been 6 months and they're still screaming.
Yeah.
Has it been 6 months? We should go together. We should all go to Golders Green next. We should do the next protest. We should do the next protest in Golders Green. Yeah, that's what I think. Because it showed here's the thing, bro. They think Golders Green is like no Muslim zone. That's what it's become now. So no Muslim zone is like no journalism allowed. The Jewish people cannot be questioned, or just like Muslim people. This is nonsense. I think it's totally.
Well, basically, there was a mosque in Golders Green. I think it was a Shia mosque or whatever, and all the residents complained about it, even though it was the most compliant mosque in the world, and they were pro-Zionist and they were pro-establishment. All the residents complained that there was a mosque in Golders Green.
This is exactly like when you went to. I think it was you. I saw a video of you. I'm not sure, you can correct me, or whether your colleagues. You went to Taliban. You went to Afghanistan. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Okay. Well, someone will say, "Look, this guy is a terrorist. He's in bed with the Taliban." Look, so people will say everything about anyone. Like when the Quran says, "Ya ayyuhan nas," Allah in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 54, where it says, "May yartadda minkum an dinihi fasawfa ya'ti Allahu biqawm يحبهم ويحبونه أذلة على المؤمنين أعزة على الكافرين يجاهدون في سبيل الله ولا يخافون لومة لائم." That whoever apostates from the religion of Islam, that Allah will bring another people, that they are very humble with the believers and very mighty with the disbelievers. Now, which disbelievers are we talking about? Those ones, the Zionists, and that yujahidu, they struggle in the path of Allah, and they don't fear the blame of the blamers.
No,
like I'm not. I have no. This is why I wrote. Let me tell you what I wrote to the Jewish Chronicle. Yeah, let me tell you, because I think it's very important that we have this.
While you find that, I think, Roshan, if you were to be honest, there is a generational stylistic difference.
You call me old. You call me old. Right?
No, I'm not calling you old.
I'm saying that. What I'm saying is
there's a particular generation which I would say appreciate and will support the kind of approach that hijab took, and others.
This is what I done, and they didn't. By the way, they asked me for a comment, and they never put this up. That's what I said. My message to the Jewish community is as follows: I and my community come in peace. If individual members and institutes wish to label me as an anti-Semite, despite my opposition to such notions available on the public record, I say go ahead. I fear you not. The fact that individual members have resorted to this indicates weakness and defeat. This does not deter me from pro-Palestinian activism, whether I choose to do this in Edgware Road or Golders Green. This is a free country. I would prefer, however, if traditionalist Muslims like me and Jews from all backgrounds like much of the readership of this paper, would come to common terms and be cordial and friendly as well as peaceful. This is our stance. They are basically trying to limit our movements. If you think about what the law says one thing, they're saying that even if you do what's in line with the law, which is that I have a journalistic right to go and ask anybody anything, so if they don't want to be asked, they can leave. This is how the world works. I mean, just like you, if they don't want to answer any question, they can go. You know, unless I am being racist, unless I am saying that these people are bad because they are Jewish, which has never been said. In fact, I believe it's anti-Sharia to say that, anti-Islamic to say that. Then they can call it if they want to call me anti-Semitic, or you or anybody else, I'm sure they consider all of us as anti-Semites, by the way. Then let them, please let them, because you know what that does? It cheapens, for them, it cheapens actual anti-Semitism. Because I actually feel sorry for Jews who are oppressed because they are Jews. I feel sorry for those ones who, because they are Jews, the real anti-Semitism. You know, I don't feel, because what happens is when they cheapen the notion, anyone who goes against Israel, okay, then they become an anti. It's like a currency. The more demand, how does currency devalue? Currency is based on demand and supply. So if you refer to everybody as an anti-Semite, you're cheapening the currency of that label. So what they're doing is they're weakening that label. They're calling Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite. How much do you think of the British public take this stuff seriously? I don't think much of the British public take the Zionist lobby and their labels seriously. Honestly, I don't think they do.
I'm gonna tell you now, my brother. They take it very seriously.
Well, it doesn't matter. How about that? If let them take it seriously.
No, of course, for us it doesn't matter.
Take it seriously.
We don't care. The dawah and the battle carries on. We don't stop. But you asked the question: how serious do you think the British public take it? They take it very seriously. Do you think
that Jeremy Corbyn? Do you think that the majority of people if you ask 10 people in the street, any at random, 100,000 people
outside of London,
this man is a racist and that he's anti-Semitic?
Outside of London, bro.
No, get 1,000 people everywhere. Do you think that people see Jeremy Corbyn as a racist and anti-Semitic?
I would say those who are Tory, those who back the Conservative government would have.
Yeah, of course they will. They'll do it for political points. But I'm saying the general lay folk in the street, I don't think they see him as that. I think they know that this man's got no racist bone in his body. Like he's from the 70s. He's been championing anti-racist policies. Like, let's call a spade a spade. Most people know that.
There's been Jews that have come out in his defense as well. But look,
what I'm saying is that if they're calling someone like that, which is probably one of, if you like, one of the most anti-racist people in British politics, if they're calling him an anti-Semite, effectively calling him a racist,
yeah, but that's because they've synonymized anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism.
Honestly, don't worry. I just want to say to Mohammed, people at 5 Pillars, don't worry if they call you that, because now they're calling Jewish people that. Look, let me show you something. Once again, this is an article. This is a Jewish woman. Yeah. I'm not sure if you've seen this article. This is.
I think the lady was a Labour councillor or a Labour member, wasn't she? An elderly Jewish.
Her name is Diana Nelson. She's 82. She was a Jewish woman, Diana Nelson. Can you see that?
Yeah.
This is the thing. Jewish woman accused of anti-Semitism. She's accused of look. Jews are being accused of anti-Semitism now. It's become a cheap label that the Zionists have used against her. Do you think people really take this seriously? I genuinely don't think that these labels are affecting the majority of British people.
Dilly Muhammad, let me just jump in quickly because we got Robert Carter and Moazzam Begg waiting in the background. What should we do, Dilly? Shall we continue with Mohammed for a few more minutes?
No, let's wrap up this segment. But there's something I wanted to quickly say to Hijab. Hijab, look, bro, yeah, you know, I saw the conversation you had with the BBC journalist, the video that you released. It was about 47 minutes, about an hour. I think there's a few things which we need to kind of just clarify very quickly. A few times you've been asked, how would you feel if Jews came into a predominantly Muslim area and did the same thing, right? So I think we want to clarify that if you were to compare numbers, so let's say Muslim support for ISIS or Muslim support for Al-Qaeda, it is so fringe, it is so fringe that from a demographic point of view, the numbers would mean nothing. There is no stream of any normative mainstream support for organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in our communities, right? So you can't make that comparison. Whereas when you look at the support for Israel from Jewish communities in Britain, you will find that not only are many dual nationals, but Israel now declares itself as a Jewish nation state. So it proactively identifies as a state for the Jewish people. Now, if such level of support was there for, let's say, ISIS or the Saudi regime or Al-Qaeda or Taliban, if such levels of support existed, such public show of support existed, where people were dual nationals of these polities, I'd understand if people came to our areas in Luton or in Edgware Road or in Ilford or in Green Street or in Brick Lane or in Bradford. That makes sense. I just think these false analogies are incorrect, and we need to smash them from the very beginning.
Like, if people want to come to the Muslim people outside of a mosque and ask them about anything, let them. Just like Pew Research does the same thing. How do you think Pew Research collects its data? Do you think Pew Research estimates its data? No, it gets Muslims and asks them questions. You can say, well, the whole premise of asking a Muslim questions about whether they accept or support terrorism is false. But I don't think anyone is making that argument. But if that's allowed on a sociological basis, then why is it not allowed on a journalistic level? So the thing is, I don't see any. I think the whole thing is legitimate. If people want to come and ask Muslim people in any area, if you want to get a sample group of people and ask them about terrorism and about whether they support this, and I think the British people should know. Actually, I think this is the right of the British people to know. The dominant population should know how many of these Muslims actually support ISIS. I think that's fair enough. Fair enough. Let them know that, because when they realize, like you said, it's a negligible amount, it creates harmony and peace. And if it isn't a negligible amount, there's a problem that needs solving. So I don't think it's illegitimate to go to any Muslim area or to get a group of Muslim people and ask them what they think of groups which we know target civilians like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and so on. And if people decide to do that with those groups, I don't think they're being Islamophobic at all.
Quick, before we let you go, 2022, what you got in store for 2022? We know you released a book under the Sapiens Institute, Burhan. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, it was ranking #1 Amazon downloads, I think, for a little while. What has 2022 got for you and Sapiens? Hit me up quickly. What's going on? What should we expect in the next year?
What we're going to do is we've got books coming out. So we've got translated books. With Sapiens Institute, we've got at least 3 more books coming out. So as you mentioned, Burhan is coming. Has come out as a book that's now become the bestseller on Amazon and in the atheist and agnostic sections, and in the UK, in the US, and so on. Alhamdulillah, that's done well. So we're bringing out more books like that. We're bringing one translated book of, it's like 100,000. I think, sorry, not 100,000. It should be about 400 pages coming out. So a big book. Which is in Arabic, which has now been translated into English, is coming out. A book on doubts is coming out. We've got like 10 different courses that are happening in Sapiens. So that's one thing. And of course, these engagements I'm going to be doing with like Ayan Hirsi Ali and, I should be saying Ayan McGann and others like her. Maybe 1 or 2 other engagements, but we'll have to see it play by ear and see what happens next. And of course, we're all going to be together, I'm sure, as a Muslim community. If anything that requires activism is there, then we'll be there doing the activism as well, because I don't believe there is a separation between doing da'wah to Allah and also having and also protecting the rights of the Muslims. So we'll be there doing the activism as well. And in terms of so that's basically in a nutshell what we're going to be doing, inshallah.
A busy 2022, my brother. Jazakumullah khair for giving us your time. Convey our salams to everyone at Sapiens, to Zishan and Ali as well, and keep us in the du'as, bro. Jazakumullah khair for your time.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Okay. All right, assalamu
alaikum.
Okay, so that was Mohammed Hijab. Let me get my 2 other guests on, who both been waiting patiently for the last 10 minutes. Apologies for that. So I will introduce them both shortly, inshallah. So at the bottom right, we have Moazzam Begg. Assalamu alaikum, Moazzam. How are you doing, brother? Oh, I can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself, Moazzam.
Mute. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum assalam.
You look like you've lost weight as well, Moazzam.
No, just the camera, man. That's all. Just
the camera angle. You're
MashaAllah, Moazzam's had the paint work done. MashaAllah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
He's looking fresh.
You're like 20 years younger.
Allah bless him and preserve him. Robert, how you doing, bro?
The Prophet
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. What's going on, guys? You all right?
There's no difference between black and white.
Of course.
Dilly, let me introduce both these guys, even though it's just a formality, really. Moazzam, I'm just going to say, former Guantanamo Bay inmate, which you're always going to be the most famous for that, aren't you, Moazzam? But you're also outreach director for Cage. And I just learned this morning there was a Cage event at exactly the same time as this live stream. So I apologize to them personally because I completely missed that. I wouldn't have held it at the same time. So I actually did. You're not going to be happy with me, but I told everybody, if you're going to choose between the two, go to Cage because they advertise it first. Catch up with us later.
It's all right. So that event's finished now, so they can join.
Oh, is it? All right. Yeah, but I think it did start at 6:30. So anyway, and Robert on the bottom left. So Robert I think Robert is going to be. I don't want to say this now because it just sounds like I'm kissing his feet, but I think you're going to be like one of the big Muslim stars the next couple of decades. Because you're a bit young, you're a bit green at the moment, a bit wet behind the ears, but you'll get the experience. And Robert's got he's a journalist and he's got he's got podcasts. He's got millions of views on TikTok, which I haven't figured out yet. I think TikTok's like a sign of the end of times, personally. But you're big on TikTok, big on YouTube, and you're going places. Is that right?
Well, only Allah knows, innit? So we'll have to wait and see. But that was a very generous introduction, I have to say. It's a shame you couldn't have done it when Mohammed Hijab was here, because I could have benefited from that. But no, thank you very much. Very kind of you.
I don't want to offend him too much. But Robert, before we start, I just wanted to say, your podcast hasn't got a name. Like, Dilly's podcast is Blood Brothers. Why don't you call it White Savior?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, everyone likes to do White Savior. Or the White Muslim Revert. That's original.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not really a podcast yet. Basically, it's just where I dump everything that I get up to. And as you know, I get into trouble all the time, winding people up. So it's more of a YouTube channel, just a generic channel, than an actual podcast. Nowhere near the level of production quality as Dilly's.
I reckon the fact that you're a White Revert already adds about 5,000 views and likes onto it before you even say anything. That's what.
Roshan, I always wonder. You know when you smash white people, I was always wondering, does your dear mum ever watch any of these programs?
No, unfortunately, I found out the other day that she actually had found my YouTube channel, and it was a bit of an awkward discussion. Yeah. I thought she wouldn't see any of this stuff.
Yeah,
anyway.
She is going to see something.
Brothers, should we begin? Because obviously this is Muslim Review of the Year. I think the biggest story was Afghanistan. And Moazzam obviously is an expert. I'm not going to say too much because I think everyone knows my views on Afghanistan. Before we start, given that I did put together a few videos, I really want to play out one. So just to kick off the discussion on Afghanistan, take a look at this. Give me 10 seconds to find it. So this basically was the Taliban talking the day after the Americans left. First, I congratulate the whole nation because we've achieved our independence and we were able to force the Americans to leave after 20 years of jihad and sacrifice. All foreign forces, especially the Americans, left Afghanistan last night around 12 o'clock, and our country has achieved its independence. This independence belongs to the whole nation, and all our people were involved in it. They've suffered hardship in these last 20 years, so I congratulate them all. I want to first thank God, who granted us this mercy, and then thank the Mujahideen and people who've been involved in this movement and made sacrifices.
ما اطمینان کلی میتیم به مردم هیچ تشویشی نداشته باشن امارات اسلامی افغانستان به خاطر آمده که امنیت را تامین بکنه.
We give full assurances to everybody. Nobody should have any concerns. The Islamic Emirate is here to provide security, to secure people's dignity. We'll work day and night. God willing, a government will soon be announced. All government offices will reopen. The banks and the economy will start moving. The country will take steps towards prosperity, far from war and insecurity. People will return to their normal lives.
فارغ از جنگ، فارغ از مشکلات امنیتی.
Okay, so inshallah, I'm going to kick this off, brothers, because obviously I went to Afghanistan last month. I spent a good 2.5 weeks there. I won't say too much because I think everyone basically knows my views. They followed my reports. They watched the podcast with Dilly. So briefly, all I'm going to say, alhamdulillah, the Americans got kicked out. Alhamdulillah, there's at least a chance of peace and security in the country. In fact, there is peace and security. It's not a war zone. My personal experience with the Taliban is they're not the evil monsters that everyone portrays. They're just ordinary people who want the best for their country. But at the same time, economic terrorism is being conducted against Afghanistan at the moment. Basically, the Americans and others, the West, they're punishing the Taliban for having defeated them, and they're making them suffer. And of course, it's the ordinary people who are facing starvation and food insecurity. There's no money in the country. So many people are trying to leave. So those are my basic thoughts. And I won't go into any more depth because I'm actually going to go to Moazzam, who is much more of an expert than me on Afghanistan, having lived there for several years. What are your views there, Moazzam?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. When I saw the day, like everybody else, when Kabul was liberated, the Bagram prison was evacuated, and it was then also liberated. I had friends who were in prison with me in Bagram who went into the prison there, filmed and sent me back images of the prison that I had been held with him and saw people tortured. And he's standing there with Taliban soldiers, literally liberators of this crime scene, because this was still is the scene of a crime where Americans murdered prisoners. I can't describe to you. We all do as Muslims are required to do something called sajda to shukr at a time when we believe that we should be thankful to Allah. So I fell down in prostration and made sajda to shukr and thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I lived to see this place liberated, this place where I lived. I had moved. I was building a school. The Taliban were there around at the time. I was there with my wife, with my children, and then I saw America destroy this place. And this is so important, Roshan, that when they talk about the Taliban being whatever they are, evil and so forth, the Taliban don't have the capacity. And I don't think if they had the capacity, they wouldn't do it. This is what I think. I think if the Taliban had vacuum bombs, if they had cluster bombs, if they had daisy cutters that weigh 15,000 pounds and then 22,000 pounds, I don't think they would use them. I really don't think they would use them. But the Americans did. And I saw them. I felt the aftershocks of those bombs. I felt the windows crash, smash just from the aftershock. I had to hide with my wife and children and other people's children coming into my basement that could have been our mass grave if a bomb would have landed on us. And I saw tons of people in the hospitals, the graveyards filling, body parts. That was America. That was the start of America's liberation. And it went on for 20 years, in which they killed tens of thousands of people. When Kabul fell, not a shot was fired by the Taliban. And this is so important that people understand this, whether it's the diaspora of people who are calling the Taliban all sorts of things, or whether it's the pro-Americans or whatever, that if you want to have your legacy of when you invaded Afghanistan was death and destruction. The Taliban came in giving orders that nobody will fire a shot. They said, and this is not something that Britain or America would ever do or have ever done. They said that anybody that collaborated against us will be free as long as they lay their arms down. They will be welcome to come and work with us in the government, even if they said it and they didn't do it yet. But they have done something that the West never does. The West is the most unforgiving when it comes to traitors. And yet now we're told, how come the Taliban hasn't fulfilled its promise of bringing those collaborators, those traitors, those people who sold them out, those people who fought against them? Why haven't they joined the government? I mean, just as an example, the Conservatives would never share government with Labour. They're not at war with one another, but they would never do so, even when there's peace. So how do you expect people that have been fighting you and collaborating with an enemy against you for all of these years, that all of a sudden you think that they should be automatically sharing government? Yet that's what they've said. For the sake of peace, they're prepared to talk to them. And that shows their largesse, it shows magnanimity, and it shows the contrast to what the West has done. And I can tell you, having seen their troops on the ground, British and American, they are taught to be, I don't think they are by nature, but they are taught to be deeply vengeful. And of course, if we were to follow the Islamic precepts of forgiveness, the West would not come anywhere near of how we should be. And I think that's the part of the Taliban we're not being told about enough.
I think, Moazzam,
yeah, go on.
I would go further than you and say that it's unprecedented in the history of the world. The amnesty, the compassion that the Taliban have shown to their enemies, who, as you rightly described, were collaborators and traitors. They literally sold their nation to foreign invasion forces, you know, and they've let them off, you know, and they're not harassing them. They're not trying. I mean, I understand there were some reprisals against perhaps people with the most blood on their hands, who literally, the people who were kind of calling in airstrikes against civilians. But other than that, they literally have forgiven. So there is an echo. Where's it coming from, brothers?
I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Maybe when someone's speaking, if you could all mute your mics, that might help.
Yeah.
And then unmute when I come to you. I think that would help because people are saying that there's an echo.
Roshan, can I ask Moazzam a question, please?
Yes, absolutely. But let's bring Robert in afterwards.
Sure. Moazzam, I just want to ask you a quick question. It's something that I asked Roshan. And that is that, of course, millions of Muslims, whether they articulate and profess this publicly or privately, so many Muslims, they rejoiced when the Taliban took over Kabul and the rest of the country and the occupation came to an end. But I'm going to ask you what I asked Roshan. Given that $9 billion or a figure around about that much has been frozen, given that no country has formally recognized the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, considering that there is economic sanctions at the moment as we speak, how much should we truly expect from the new Taliban administration in terms of to measure them on Islamic standards? Because at the end of the day, they're an Islamic group, they're an Islamic movement, they claim to be Islamic, they want to rule by Sharia. In such difficult circumstances, how much should we really expect from the new administration?
Well, if we're sincere, and this is really important, the sincerity will show through. If people are expecting the Taliban to be this great vision of an Islamic state and to implement every little thing, then they haven't understood that the nature of the war is simply not over. And you can't expect these guys to do what more powerful nations altogether couldn't do. But what you can say about them, first of all, and we must recognize, is that they defeated they didn't just defeat America, they defeated NATO. Because this wasn't just America by itself. It was America, it's Britain, it's France, it's Belgium, it's Turkey. It's all of these most powerful nations in the world. That's the first thing. None of these other countries have done that. Secondly, there is an economic, I think you used economic terrorism, Roshan, to say that's what's being waged against them. That's absolutely right. People think that what's being held back, this 9 billion, is money, aid money. It's not aid money. This is Afghan money, the savings of ordinary Afghan people. The fact that the United States is holding their back and has frozen their money shows that this is sour grapes. They just cannot take it. That they haven't been militarily defeated on a battlefield, but they simply did not have the wherewithal to stay the course. And that is what determines the winner of any fight, is that are you prepared to go the rounds? And they weren't. So they have won. And what we should do is support them, at least in dua, at least verbally, at least say, even though those countries have not recognized them officially, I can tell you that the delegations have gone from Britain, from Pakistan, from Uzbekistan, from China, from Russia, from all of these countries are going regularly. So there is a de facto recognition, even if there isn't one in practical terms. And inshallah, I have a full belief that the way that the alternatives are chaos, and nobody's prepared for that anymore. So they must do. Recently, there are British ministers and others and backbenchers like Rory Stewart who are saying that they must recognize the Taliban and work with them for practical reasons. And I think that will happen.
Okay. Should we just bring Robert in? I know you've been waiting there patiently for quite a while. Your views on what happened in Afghanistan over the last year, Robert?
Assalamu alaikum, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on as a guest, particularly when we have some real heavyweight speakers involved. Obviously, I haven't been to Afghanistan, so I don't want to, I think the last thing we need is more Westerners saying their piece about Afghanistan when they've never even been to the country. But what I will say is that I have been very disturbed by the coverage that we've seen about Afghanistan since the Taliban takeover. And it's quite clear, and I know from past experience in dealing with mainstream platforms like the BBC, that they clearly have an editorial line which they enforce, but they also claim to be impartial at the same time, which is deeply misleading. And one area where I think the Taliban takeover has sort of opened a door of opportunity for Western media is to attack the religion of Islam. So what they'll do is they'll conflate the Taliban, which is a group, a political group based in Afghanistan, and that's one issue on its own. But then they're conflating it with the religion and what the religion of Islam teaches, what Muslims believe elsewhere in the world. And I think that they've used it as an excuse to basically vent all of their deeply Islamophobic views under the cloak of this is criticism of the Taliban, which we in the West believe are a bunch of barbaric savages. And that's what I found deeply disturbing. Things like attacks on the niqab, for example, that's been widespread in the weeks and months following the Taliban takeover. Also, the concept of women's rights in an Islamic Emirate. Everyone in the West, in the mainstream media anyway, are just assuming that, okay, that means women are going to be miserable and oppressed, and they need saving from all of these bearded men that are going to be, keeping them at home, denying them an education, when obviously from what I've seen, that's not the case at all. So that's what I would say on Afghanistan. But obviously, it is a massive story, and I think that the Muslim world has a responsibility now, whether they, back the Taliban or not. Quite frankly, that the people of Afghanistan need to be helped against what is essentially economic terrorism that the West is using.
Yeah, brothers, we're already like at 7:40. I think we should move on. We haven't done this topic enough justice, but I want to get through as many stories as possible. The only thing I would say in response to you, Robert, is I think that people are comparing the Taliban from the Taliban of the 90s, and this Taliban is not that Taliban. When I was there, I thought they were quite soft in many ways. They're not even trying to enforce Sharia. I saw plenty of women going around without hijab, or very loose hijab, especially in like posher parts of Kabul. And what are you laughing at, Dilly?
because the thing is that there'll be so many aspects of the Sharia that they are implementing that people just won't know, because people conflate Sharia with whipping.
Yeah.
But I'm very sure that the advisors of the IEA, from fiscal policies to social policies to education policies, I'm very sure there's a lot of aspects of Sharia that they are implementing, or they're at least trying their utmost best to implement. But obviously the things which we synonymize with Sharia.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that obviously Taliban in the 90s, we saw the images like going around whipping people. That's not happening, this is not happening. Obviously we have Al-Qaeda in bases, etc. That's not there either. They're fighting ISIS. ISIS have made takfir against them. So all I'm trying to say is that it's not the Taliban of the 90s. And when we think of the Taliban, we've got this fixation of the Taliban of the 90s. Let's move on, brothers. Let's. I know we touched on Palestine with Mohammed Hijab, but we only really talked about his trip to Golders Green, didn't we? We didn't talk about Palestine, and that's quite frankly far more important than his trip to Golders Green. And I know he's not here to defend himself.
I
want to talk about our brothers and sisters in Palestine, what they're going through, not about a YouTuber going down Golders Green. Anyway, let's begin the again. You see, I'm not going to play out all these videos, but I did a video, so I've got to start the topic off with a video. This is what happened to Al-Aqsa, the third holiest place in Islam. This is what happened in May this year. So obviously May this year, it seems like an age ago now, just to recount the events for the viewers. Obviously, Sheikh Jarrah, that's where it all started, when Palestinians were evicted by settlers from their homes. And then we had the Israeli attacks on Al-Aqsa, which provoked Muslim outrage all over the world. Hamas responded to those attacks by launching some missiles into Israel. And then Israel absolutely pummeled Gaza. The only thing I would say is that this seems to be like every year this happens. Gaza gets pummeled, Muslims get angry, we hold protests, it calms down, and then the next year the same thing happens again and again and again. How are we going to move beyond that? How are we going to break that cycle? Dilly, I'll start off with you.
I think so. As long as Palestine remains occupied, because of its religious significance in our scripture, I think that it will always hold a very special place in the hearts and minds of the Muslims, irrespective of where we are on this world. And I think it's a natural reaction and a positive one, that when Muslims show anger, passion, unwillingness to accept oppression and injustice against their brothers and sisters, I think it's a good thing. I think it's an outpour of energy that needs to be harnessed and strategically allocated in different areas, in terms of coordinating, in terms of activism and stuff and so forth. In terms of breaking this repetitive cycle of something happens in Gaza, we kick off, people hit the streets, we raise lots of money, lots of letters to the MPs, quietens down, repeat year or two after. I think to change that course, there needs to be a wider conversation about those who can actually make those kind of very serious, meaningful, radical changes. And that wouldn't be lay folk like you and I. It would have to be policymakers. It would have to be Muslim governments. It would have to be those entities and institutions that would at least try their best to change the course in which the Muslim community, especially the West, reacts and responds to these things. Our Muslim faith leaders, the representatives and the heads of our institutions and our organizations, if they showed some consistency and backbone and on these issues, then I think we can move forward. But what happens is that outside of the bombardment of Gaza, when things are quiet and cushy, you will find that Muslim organizations, very prominent ones, won't have problems having interfaith events with pro-Zionists. We won't have any problems holding hands and acknowledging Hanukkah and so forth with Zionists. So I think there's a lot to be done in terms of Western/British faith leaders in trying to change the course of how we respond to the issue of Gaza and any other Muslim majority country where occupation and oppression is taking place.
One thing I think, sorry to butt in, guys, but one thing I think is that we let people off with this two-state solution thing. A two-state solution is something that people hide behind when they don't want to solve the issue. Jeremy Corbyn did it all the time, and everyone gave him a free pass. But Jeremy Corbyn knows, he's an expert on Palestine, because I knew him before he became Labour leader, and Palestine was literally his passion. He knows very well that the two-state solution means the destruction of Palestine. That's what it means. But when he was Labour leader, that's all he talked about, because it was a way of giving the Palestinians a few crumbs, but not actually addressing the issues. And I think that's something that we've got to attack. Whenever anyone talks about the two-state solution, we've got to tell them, all right, that means you're siding with Israel.
But Roshan, just before I want to get Moazzam's thoughts on it, but the two-state solution is something that's even been uttered by AKP politicians and policymakers and Imran Khan's government. And so I think the 1967 borders or the 1973 borders two-state solution is something that's very common, and that's even uttered by Muslim organizations and leaders in the West and in the Muslim world. What I want to ask Moazzam is the whole two-state solution proposition something from a maslahah point of view, from a political pragmatist point of view? Is this something that is positive for the sake of argument, whilst knowing well and truly deep inside that Muslims can't really accept the existence of such an oppressive and occupying entity?
To my understanding, nobody is even talking about this two-state solution anymore, even from the both sides of the discussion. It's one state, and it should return to back to what it was before it was stolen and handed over by force of arms. And that's one of the things, really. This is really what it's down to. It's down to who has the physical wherewithal, the might, the military might and power to be able to sustain a protection of their land. Israel is able to do so with America's backing. It's as simple as that. There's no other way to describe this. Israel breaks, forget every one of the United Nations sanctions and regulations and resolutions, forget all of the discussions, forget Oslo, forget all of that. This, in the end, who has the most military power? And the only reason why Gaza has remained as it is because it is that last bastion that's fighting off. And my sense is, and I had this dream during Ramadan in which I saw myself in Gaza walking around, and then bombs are landing everywhere, and then all of a sudden we see this group of people that appear as silhouettes, and it turns out that they're Afghan mujahideen. And the locals say, this isn't Afghanistan, this is Gaza, it's a prison and stuff. And they said, yes, but you have two things that we never had. You have al-Masra al-Mubarak. This is in my dream, I see it. You have the place of where the Prophet ﷺ went for his night journey, and you have the love and the support of the Muslim world. We had neither of those things. And then one of the Taliban fighters, once the jets come back again, he aims up his stinger and fires his Bismillah Allahu Akbar, and he smacks down this aircraft. Everybody just, their views there, from being a terrified people in this dream, from running away, they start to scream their takbirat loud. They're so loud that the place echoes. The Taliban guy says, we just saved this present for one of you, for you, our brothers. And this is what my sense is. Why is there, with the amount of anti-aircraft, mobile anti-aircraft systems that exist, why can't they be got into Gaza and these other places? Why can't all of those countries and places and individuals who claim to support them, bring them in? Because that would change the face of their attacks, their repeated attacks, that you no longer have. If you have air superiority, you may have that, but you don't have air security. You're no longer safe there. And once you start doing that, you start giving people a sense of confidence. And the only people who's going to be, in my sense, the only people who fought for Palestine are the Palestinians. Everybody else has capitulated. Everybody else has given up. Everybody else is defeated. They're the last people. And a lot of the Palestinians are defeated too. Gaza is the last bastion. It's the last place. Everybody else is sold out to different types of ideologies. And it's that last place. And that's why they're constantly put on a terrorism list. You know, remember, Hamas has just recently put on the terror. It's as if they weren't treated like, what were they treated like before that? They're terrorists anyway. Everybody calls them terrorists anyway. Why? For defending yourself. This is unbelievable, because when the Nazis were going to occupy Britain, they had an entire program in Osterley Park, which was, it's known today as Dad's Army as a joke, but they were going to carry out terrorist activity against the Nazi occupiers of their land. And they were going to be treated as heroes. The last stand. It was going to be the last stand for Britain. When Hamas does it over there, they're called terrorists. And so this is how we should present it, like that equivalent to what would you do if the Nazis had occupied your land? And that's how we should present it. And the only solution will come, in my view, from fighting these people back. There is no other solution.
Can I ask Robert about something? Because I know you did an investigation into basically Israeli propaganda in British schools. So obviously we talked about Palestine, but we talked about the effects, the after effects of on basically censorship, pro-Palestinian activism in British schools. There was an eruption of that after the events in Al-Aqsa, and it was clamped down upon. We've probably forgotten about this story now, it feels so long ago. But you did a subsequent investigation. You found that there were a few organizations basically operating in British schools doing Israeli propaganda, covert.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, there are particular groups which they introduce lessons and teaching styles, and they do training courses with teachers and things like that, with government backing, to basically handle this very difficult and contentious issue of the Palestine conflict. Now, obviously, these groups tend to claim that they're impartial and that they're fair and that they don't take sides, and that they're only there to basically equip teachers with the ability to tackle these very difficult, sensitive issues, particularly in schools which have a lot of Muslim students, for example, that may feel very passionately about the Palestinian cause. But actually, when you dig below the surface, They're shadowy organizations that don't particularly like to be, like they don't speak to the media very often. We actually went to the address of one of these groups to try and speak to a representative, because they, their phone number when you ring doesn't go through. When you email them, they don't get back to you. And, we showed up there. We waited outside all day. No staff showed up. And when we actually asked someone, look, where is everyone? The building's empty. They said, well, they're here and they're not here. So they're shadowy organizations that actually what they teach children is a very pro-Israel position, which is very biased. It's contrary to historical fact in many cases. And it's...
Name them.
Yeah, I'll just get up some names. The investigation was actually done by my colleague Ahmed, so he knows all the details. And we actually have a show coming out very soon on a brand new program about the Palestinian cause. They're different groups. I'll have to probably come back to you and give you some names.
Solutions Not Sides is one of them, right? Solutions Not Sides.
Solutions Not Sides is the big one. That's the one which we actually went and investigated directly to try and speak to someone from this group and actually challenge them. Things like, some of the representatives of the group have links to Israel, or have been financed or supported by pro-Israel groups, things like that. But then they claim to be impartial, claim to be interested in defending the Palestinian cause, but they also recognize Israel, and they don't recognize or educate people about the illegal colonialism that's going on in Palestine and things like that. So it's about censorship, it's about brainwashing and indoctrination, quite frankly, and that's what's very scary.
So brothers and sisters, if this group comes into your kids' school, Solutions Not Sides, and there are others, complain. Do not tolerate.
Cage provides a service to the community where if children are questioned or pulled aside or reprimanded for being pro-Palestine, Cage, you can contact Cage. Because I remember during that period, Cage provided a free advice service to the community for children that were being penalized and questioned.
Basically, these groups are run by ex-Israeli army officers. And they come into school and they pretend to be neutral. They say, oh, there's a bit of fault on that side. There's a bit of fault on this side. If only everyone can get together and talk. This is how they present, ultimately, genocide. It's a black and white issue. It's David versus Goliath. But they don't present it in those terms. They present it like it's a 50-50 battle. Okay? That in itself is misleading. It's lying, etc., etc. Do not tolerate it. Ask your school to get Friends of Al-Aqsa in, and groups like that who can, if they're going to get Solutions Not Sides, get them, insist that Friends of Al-Aqsa come in as well and talk to your children.
Can I just I'll just jump in real quick. A lot of Muslim parents that might be watching this, they may not know about Solutions Not Sides yet, but what we can compare it to is the No Outsiders lessons, which I think a lot of Muslim parents are aware of now. That's an indoctrination lesson of sorts, which has been introduced into many Muslim majority schools in Muslim majority areas in a very, very suspicious way to try and change Muslim beliefs. And Solutions Not Sides works in a very similar way, except these are different groups pushing different ideas, which again are contrary to what Islam teaches, what Muslims think and feel. And it's all about basically targeting the young, impressionable youth to change their beliefs and pull them away from what their parents are teaching them, which is actually the moral right thing, basically.
Guys, I'm going to move on because we're running out of time. So I'm going to have to drop a few subjects, but I really want to talk about this next issue. Just a final word, if I can, on Palestine. What I would say, brothers and sisters, is that at the moment, it's not a good situation, is it? If I'm honest, from secular terms, at the moment, the Palestinians are losing and the Israelis are winning. But basically, I think we have to wait for a better moment. At the moment, there is no political solution. Perhaps there's no military solution, but that ain't going to be the case forever. Things do change. Inshallah, the situation will change for the Palestinians. I believe their biggest jihad is actually just staying there, staying on the land and not moving. And I know that us here sitting in the West, kind of comfortable life in the West, judging the Palestinians, telling them to give up the hope of a better life somewhere else is a bit rich. But I do sincerely believe that we should encourage our Palestinian brothers and sisters to just stay where they are. That is, for me, one of their biggest jihads. But let's talk about this now.
I need somebody to hear, somebody to know, somebody to hold, somebody to hold. It's easy to say, but it's never the same. I guess I'm trying to let you in, and I'm gonna pay you now the day bleeds. It's a nightfall, and you know he isn't getting through it all. I let my guard down, and then you pull the rug. I was getting kinda used to being so in love.
May Allah forgive me for playing out that video. I'm sorry, but I had to. Obviously, I think most people will know the context behind it. Obviously, there's been a westernization process in Saudi for many years, culminating in a massive rave in the desert. And obviously, we saw people, inebriated. People were inebriated at that event. There was drugs being consumed, men and women dancing together, singing and dancing in front of the Shahada, Astaghfirullah. Moazzam, your thoughts?
Well, brother, when people see the flag of the Shahada with ISIS, everybody goes around and say, oh, look, that's not Islam. That's not Islam. It's not Islam. But now we see the flag of the Shahada with Saudi Arabia. Let's also remember that's not necessarily Islam. You know what, subhanAllah, I don't know if you recall, but a few years ago, I actually put out this note on Facebook, and I said that, there were great scholars of Islam before in the past who, when they saw that the Muslim Ummah was suffering and they were on the way to Hajj, they stopped their Hajj halfway, like Abdullah Mubarak, and they returned. And they didn't complete their Hajj because there was something much more important taking place, i.e. the starvation, Muslims dying. And I said, perhaps for a few years, Muslims should stop going for Hajj, stop going for Umrah, rather, especially for those who go every year religiously, and could perhaps put their struggle towards something else. I got hammered or attacked by some people, particularly supporters of Saudi Arabia, but thousands of people actually liked what I said. And if nothing else now, this is a forebed, of a sort of forewarner to what may come. I remember this was, at the time when I did have the ability to travel to Saudi Arabia. I applied for a visa to go for Umrah, and I was rejected. And I know why I'm rejected, and the same for Hajj. And I thought, alhamdulillah, I'm glad, because then I was able to go somewhere else as a result. But I'm thinking now that if I was able to, perhaps instead of applying for a Hajj visa, I should just apply for a rave visa, and I'd probably get more likely of a chance to get there. And our supporters of Saudi Arabia today, who exist in our midst still, who love to sing their praises, and sing their praises here with a touch of pinch of salt, but literally, right? I wonder what they would say. I'm actually thinking, what are you going to say now? Obey the ruler, worship the ruler obey the ruler as long as he's worshipping Allah, obey the ruler as long as he's not committing open sins and kufr and so forth. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how long will that argument last? So I'm actually, you know what, when you guys were watching that, maybe are you saying astaghfirullah? I was actually smiling. I was smiling when I was watching that, because I was saying, alhamdulillah, finally, there is somebody that can see that it's a natural progression. It's a natural progression for them to become this way. And you know what's the irony of all ironies? The guy that's doing this is Mohammed bin Salman, right? It's MBS. And the West all knows him for being the one who organized and orchestrated the chopping apart of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, right? So on the one hand, they say, oh, look at this terrible guy. And on the other hand, they're loving the reforms he makes. So I'm loving this hypocrisy being coming out into the open, and we can all see it. And so I'm just actually enjoying it.
I
You
mean,
shouldn't
if
be
I
despondent.
if I can just add to that, I mean, brothers and sisters who are watching, for any of you who have heard of things like Wireless and Glastonbury and Reading festivals, yeah, 730,000 people attending is double combined of the attendance of all those festivals. Like 730,000 people is a huge number. Most of the attendees were from the Arab world, were from the Gulf. So it's scary what MBS's 2030 vision is looking like in 2021. And all of this falls into the wider kind of geopolitical direction of the GCC states that are moving towards normalizing Israel and so forth. I think Moazzam makes a fantastic point about how people were quick to say about the ISIS flag, oh, this isn't Islamic, this isn't Islam, and so forth, but wouldn't make the same kind of clear distinction with the Saudi flag. It's crazy because Saudi Arabia and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a age-old Western ally. That when King Abdullah passed away, UK and America did a half-mast for him when he passed away. There's no way they're gonna call him out for these things, for whether it be Khashoggi or anything else, or Yemen or anything else. I just think when you think of the numbers, 730,000. 730,000. And this is in light of the fact that literally 2 weeks ago, there was a clear order to all the masajid in the kingdom that they had to basically condemn Tablighi Jamaat for their dawah activities. This is, it's absolutely crazy. Crazy.
And remember, Dilly, before this, remember the whole kind of crackdown is the imprisonment of ulama, the imprisonment of thousands of scholars, of du'at and so forth. And these include ulama who are on record for condemning Al-Qaeda, condemning Bin Laden. I mean, the more you go down that road, it just shows you it didn't really make any difference, because that's where the Saudi government was heading in a particular way. It always has been at different levels, but this time around it showed their true colors, and I'm glad. That's why I'm actually glad you're seeing the true colors. So because people were confused before, they're not sure. Oh, look, they're the custodians of the two holy mosques. They still do Hajj. They still do. Yes, they do, but they do raves just as big as your Hajj. The raves are as big as Hajj, pretty much.
Dilly, what do you think of Moazzam's boycott idea?
I was going to add up on that. I think there needs to be a level of clarity. I think, if I recall, Moazzam said that advice was for those who had already made Hajj. Am I correct, Moazzam?
Look, my point was actually about this: is that go for Hajj, do your Hajj application, but don't allow your Hajj application or fear of losing it, not saying I'm going to remain silent because if I don't. My point was, speak the truth. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Afdalul jihad kalimat haqq 'inda sultan injar." Speak the truth. If they don't give you the visa to go for Hajj, that's his problem on Yawm al-Qiyamah, not yours.
And by the way,
my whole point was about that.
What Moazzam said was something that was echoed by a group of scholars in Libya who said the same thing. There was like a scholarly council, I think, and they said that, look, if you made Hajj once, there's no need for you to go again for Umrah or anything. Save your money to help the believers, because these people are oppressed and they interfere in the chaos and carnage of the Muslim countries. So it's actually an opinion which exists, and it's actually held by Libyan scholars.
But my other, that was one point. That was the Sheikh Al-Ghariani who said that in Libya. But my other point was actually that, no, apply for your Hajj, but make sure that you speak out against what they're doing and then go. Because don't let that be a reason for you to stop your Hajj. Say, oh, they won't give me the visa, because I've heard that. Okay. I've heard that excuse from several people who said, look, I just need to get my Hajj done.
Can I ask so basically,
Moazzam, just quickly, so Moazzam, you're saying that apply for your Hajj visa, but don't remain silent. Carry on speaking out whilst trying to get to Hajj.
If it's your first, you've never done Hajj before, and if you've done Hajj, you don't need. The Prophet ﷺ did Hajj once, and he went on Ghazwa 28 times. 28 times he went to defend Islam, and only once did he do Hajj. If you're not more, none of us are more Islamic than the Prophet ﷺ, and that's what he did. And if you want to do that, go out, help the Muslim Ummah in whatever way you can. Speak out, help at least 28 times more than Hajj.
Moazzam, can I ask you a question? How does MBS get away with this? Because, I mean, I was under the impression back in the good old days that the Saudi religious establishment and the House of Saud, they had this partnership, and it was like a 50-50 partnership. But we've since discovered that the religious establishment is so weak because this guy's just pushing them about. And not only that, he's pushing, many interests, media interests, financial interests. He's pushing everyone around about in Saudi Arabia just to get his own way. And he's doing unbelievable things. How does he get away with it? Is there going to be a backlash against him? Is this going to basically what I'm asking you is this guy going to be king for like 50 years or is he going to be dead in a year because he's got so many enemies?
I mean, quickly, Moazzam, very so quickly. I just want to add as well, on this point, is that MBS's support among Saudi youth is huge. It's the 18 16 to 25-year-olds. Saudis love him.
Yeah, they love him because they love the openness about becoming more westernized, and that's you can't help it because what's happening if you go to different parts of America, Britain, and the West, you see Saudis coming on all the time and feeling like they're missing out on what's happening in their country rather than actually showing the beautiful parts of Islam. And I think part of this is that you go from one extreme to the other. You have you literally have a police Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar virtue police on one hand, and now you've got rid of them totally. So you have virtue on one hand, now you have no virtue. How about having something in the middle? I think that's one of the problems. The other problem is that Saudi Arabia as a nation has already been like this towards the ulama. Sometimes people used to criticize Bin Baz and Uthaymeen and others for being kind of government scholars, but you realize that actually the state controlled it regardless. And the scholars had a choice of either to work within that system or to speak out against it and to get imprisoned. And that's what happened with certain scholars in the past. What you can see now is that they're prepared to put the scholars in prison en masse. If you don't toe the line, that's where you're ending up. So really what it shows is that scholars really have very little power at all. The people of Deen have very little power. And you can see you've gone from allowing a rave, as you said, to saying Tablighi Jamaat leads to terrorism. I mean, not even the Americans say that. That's ridiculous. And yet 19 of your citizens, none of whom were Tablighi Jamaat, carried out 18 of them carried out the Twin Towers attacks. They came from your ideology. They learned from that was taught in your schools, in your country. How come that isn't terrorism? So unfortunately, this is kind of all unraveling in the sight of the world. And I'm glad, again, as I say, Saudi Arabia is exposing itself to what it really is.
Robert, a brief word from you on Saudi before we move on.
Well, I think they're ultimately digging their own grave, to be honest with you. Forget the mass murder that's being conducted in Yemen right now of Muslim civilians by the regime. Forget, the fact that they have hacked a journalist to death in a consular building in Istanbul and all this other stuff. This regime is now at war with Islam, basically, and it's desecrating what was once the heartland of that religion, what should always remain the heartland of that religion, Arabia. And mark my words, things are going to get worse, inshallah, before they get better. But don't be surprised if you start seeing much more offensive things happening, not in Riyadh, but in Hijaz, and possibly moving closer and closer to our beloved holy places, because this regime doesn't care about Islam whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned.
Brothers, it is 8:10 nearly. We're already over time. We still have plenty of viewers, plenty of people engaging. If you need to go, just go. But if you're happy to carry on for maybe until 8:30, then I'm going to do it. I think Dilly will as well.
Yeah.
Is that all right with you guys?
I'll probably stay for another 10 or so minutes, and then
10 minutes. All right.
Can I ask?
I can stay till the end. Inshallah.
Moazzam, what's your thoughts on the educational reforms that have been taking place in Saudi? For example, no longer referring to the Ottoman period as Dawlat al-Uthmaniyya, now it's referred to as the Turkish occupation. Or that now Saudi is actually reviewing literature by Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, and others. Education reforms such as teaching religious pluralism, making it compulsory in certain state schools about teaching certain ideas of Hinduism. Major educational reform. These things were unheard of a couple of years ago. So, and even like Saudi and the UAE to produce a series on the Umayyads to counter that of Dillish Ertugrul and these kind of stuff. What's your thoughts on these kind of like soft policy changes in educational policies? Some of it's targeted towards a revisionist understanding and, quite frankly, a lie of a version of history, and obviously trying to counter Turkish soft policy as well.
Well, you gave the example of Ertugrul and how successful that was in not just in Turkey, but in all the Islamic world. And there's a reason for it, because it gives kind of Muslims across the board some kind of a sense of seeing Islamic heroes and Muslims as heroes. The only response to it wasn't actually by Greece or the inheritors of Byzantians like the Greeks making shows about how great the Crusaders were. The only response to that has been by the places in the Khalij, Saudi Arabia in particular, and UAE, is making a program, a series called Mamalik an-Nar, which means the empires of fire. And they're talking about the Ottomans here. And now this is their response. Unfortunately, I wish, to be fair, if they wanted to make something about a period of time that's relatively close to them, is what the role of this Al Saud family was with Lawrence of Arabia, and how important he was to the existence of that country, of Saudi Arabia, that wasn't called that before that. And if they wanted to be honest and truthful more to recent times, but just to make that, it's cheap. And the good thing about it is that nobody is, like, for example, the Ertugrul series is being watched in places as much as Brazil, as much as it is in Pakistan. And but that's not happening with Mamalik an-Nar. Nobody's watching it outside of that region. So nobody's falling for it. And that's the really good part. So what it shows you is that the Ummah and the world in general sees through the nonsense. And this attempt to read, as I said, they've gone from one extreme, literally from one extreme to the other. You've got the kind of notions of Wahhabism and where that came from, and the field that exists from within that, which is something, I practiced Islam or understood Islam from that aspect, and I understand the damage it can do to people. But they've gone literally from one extreme to the next extreme. And a reminder to them and everybody's watching, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ, that we made you like that, the nation of the middle path, so that you become a witness upon mankind. And at the moment, mankind is witnessing these people going, as I said, from one extreme to the next. And they're not fooling anybody except their own people, unfortunately.
Roshan, is it fair to be Saudi bashing all the time? When we have the UAE, we have Bahrain, we have Morocco, we have various.
Yeah, they're probably the most powerful Muslim country in the world in terms of wealth, power, influence. So yeah, I think that MBZ in the UAE may even be leading MBS to a certain extent. He might be the mentor, and a lot of these ideas with normalization with Israel may be coming from him. But the fact is, Saudi Arabia is probably the most powerful Muslim country in the world.
Why wouldn't we say the same thing about Qatar? Why wouldn't we say the same thing about Turkey?
Well, I think Muslims see redeeming qualities in Erdogan, don't they? Whereas they don't in MBS. And it's clear cut, isn't it, with Saudi Arabia? Whereas people make excuses for Erdogan. So we'll make excuses about the NATO air bases, about the relationship with Israel, because we think that he's going on a path towards Islam.
But then many listeners,
that's the excuse anyway.
Yeah, but many listeners and viewers would then say that our defense of the Saudi regime is on the same par as Erdogan and the AK party and the Qataris, because at the end of the day, many defenders of the Saudi regime, irrespective of whether it's MBS or his predecessors, they would say that we still believe that we are the vanguard and the protectorates of the Sunni world. We are the custodians of the Haram. And quite frankly, if you're going to slate our government and our rulers, then quite frankly, you should levy the same to the likes of Erdogan and the Qataris.
I think if we took a 100% principled stance, then we wouldn't go to any Muslim country, because they're all deficient in some way. So it's just unrealistic. I'm a kind of pragmatic person, so I guess I'll single out the worst offenders, and I think most Muslims will. But brothers, we've got 15 minutes left. Should we move on? Dilly, shall I hand this over to you? Because I think it'd be remiss of us not to talk about some of the most egregious examples of Islamophobia and Islamophobic countries, like India, like France, like China. Perhaps you can talk about India, because I know that this is your thing.
Yes, Moazzam, before you go, just a quick minute on the Uyghur situation, the Stand for Uyghurs protest that we did, as well as some advice on how to help the Uyghurs before you leave us, bro.
Okay, so first of all, you must have all. I was recently at the Uyghur Tribunal, where it was the decision was given by Sir Geoffrey Nice, who was the chief prosecutor of Slobodan Milosevic at the War Crimes Tribunals against what happened to the Muslims. He had come to the conclusion after months and months of evidence from Uyghurs and other Turkic people that what's happening to the Uyghurs is genocide. It's genocide not because they're being killed en masse, but it's genocide because there is an attempt to remove their identity. There's a genocide because there's forced sterilization, forced abortions, and actually the killing of actual fetuses, and an attempt to wipe out the Uyghur people and their identity, and to replace it with Han Chinese identity. What we can do and we should do is, of course, there's a Stand for Uyghur campaign, which is part of a coalition of a multitude of Muslim organizations, primarily based here in the UK. We're not part of the other organizations around the world, but we're part of this one. And we've produced, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the strongest and the largest anti-Chinese government protests in favor of the Uyghurs that's outside of any Uyghur indigenous groups. So this is something that the British Muslims should be deeply proud of. This is also an issue that's taken up by the right, but we should also remember, right or left, it doesn't matter. This is an issue for the Ummah. Just because the right and far right people are supporting it doesn't mean we should stop supporting. We should get even more involved. And it shows once again that Islamophobia, whether it's far right capitalism or far left communism, it comes together. And that's why our identity is Islam first and foremost, and the other ideologies should fall by the wayside.
Moazzam, jazakallah khair, my dear brother. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on. Brothers Robert, Dilly, and Roshan, it's my pleasure. Unfortunately, I have to leave now. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and continue your work. And it is quite, again, as I've said before, to Roshan and to you, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you strong and firm. The work that you do, unfortunately, no journalists are doing this. Roshan going to Afghanistan and interviewing people there in the way that he did, I've not seen a single Western journalist do that. And that's to your credit. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow you to continue to do so.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair, Moazzam. Take care, bro.
Assalamu alaikum.
So Roshan, if I can just give the viewers and the listeners a recap on what's been happening, a very quick one. So we've had in France the republication of the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, the blasphemous cartoons against our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course the international outrage, predominantly, mainly, but not exclusively limited to the Bangladesh, Pakistan, and other parts of the Muslim world. In fact, in Pakistan, the group Tahrik al-Begg Pakistan made it such a huge issue that they put Pakistan into standstill, and there was a standoff between this group and the Imran Khan PTI government. We obviously had in India the continued lynching and anti-Muslim pogroms in places like Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, in Karnataka and other parts of India, where Muslim neighborhoods were literally entered upon by thousands of armed Hindutva thugs with swords and metal poles and guns and axes, and have literally been destroying Muslim-owned businesses and houses. Obviously, just in 2019, we had the Citizenship Act in Assam. We had the revocation of Article 35 in occupied Kashmir in 2019. So a continuation of those policies, a continuation of the pro-BJP, Hindutva, RSS ideology is spreading like wildfire. Just this weekend that's just passed, there were huge conferences in Haryana and in New Delhi, attended by tens of thousands of people, where literally you got Hindutva priests calling for genocide, literally calling upon cleansing the entire country of Muslims and of course Christians and Sikhs as well. But their main gripe and their main war is against Islam and Muslims. We see the continued imprisonment of Uyghur Muslims in China, which is now posing an intra-Muslim debate amongst Muslims, against those who think that this is a pro-Western, a pro-American agenda, against those who believe that, no, this is yet another cause of the Ummah. We've had so we've done France, we've done India, we've done China, and of course the situation of the Rohingya is still a dire one in Myanmar. We've had Roshan in Afghanistan. The situation in Iraq is as dire as it is. So, I think the China, India, and France are the three countries that really stand out in 2021 in terms of their open transgression against Islam and Muslims in their various forms.
Brothers, I could ask you many questions and comment on many things that you said, but let's move this back to the UK because we've got 10 minutes left, inshallah. I'm gonna ask you about COVID. Now, this is something that basically we ignore on Five Pillars. And I'll be honest with you, brothers and sisters, we ignore it for a good reason. Because if I put something up on COVID, half the Muslims are going to hate me for it, and the other half are going to love me for it, and vice versa. So it's such a divisive thing in our community that we've kind of ducked it, haven't we, Dilly? We've kind of ducked this issue.
Look, I mean, I know that we differed on a few things very early on in 2020, before the first lockdown, about mosque attendance and so forth, and we kind of agreed on a safe and fair editorial policy, and that is not to endanger the community and put their health at risk.
Yeah.
But I think the problem that we've had is that there's a constituency of our followers, readers, and audience, well-wishers, supporters, donors, even contributors, even. Who believe that we've taken a very soft and pro-establishment line when it's come to lockdown and vaccines and so forth. My simple personal policy is this: if you don't want to take the vaccine, you don't do it. Just don't endanger the life of vulnerable people. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
and
especially our elderly people.
Elderly people. And at the end of the day, it still defeats me how we can be an ummah that believes in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says for every illness there is a cure. And that we can be, no one is denying big pharma, no one's denying how vaccines may have things in there which will be problematic and adverse to our health. No one's denying that this vaccine was rushed through where it normally takes 5 to 7 years, it took 1.5 years. No one's denying any of those things. What I'm positing to our Muslim brothers and sisters who happen to be on the skepticism, anti-vax kind of camp, is that if you outweigh the maslaha and the mafsada, the harm and benefit of this vaccine, I believe, and I think you'd agree with me, Roshan, that the benefit outweighs the harm. Because we'd see people falling like flies in their millions, and we've not seen that. So if people
all I would say is that everyone has to take their own decision for the good of themselves and their families, their immediate community. And I don't know enough about it, even after 1.5 years. I do have questions in my mind. I personally wish we could have had more of a debate even on Five Pillars, but to be honest, we're restricted from doing that by the laws of this country.
Yeah, YouTube will take down any video. This is policy now. If YouTube identifies any video that is misleading information to National Health England or wherever it is, the official body of your respective country, they'll take the content down. That's standard. Everyone knows that.
Yeah. And the only thing I would say is that there are some people online who think we're taking the stance we're taking because, well, we're not really taking a stance. We're just not talking about it very much. Because we're government chilled or because we're like in the pocket of big pharma or whatever, or we're cowards. That's not the case at all, brothers and sisters.
I don't know if I'd be able to sleep properly if I knew that Five Pillars, with the reach and the audience that it has, was encouraging people not to take the vaccine, and that resulted in one Muslim dying because of something that we propagated. I'd rather not go to sleep with that on my conscience. Exactly.
Robert, briefly, have you been microchipped by Bill Gates 3 times?
No, not yet. But basically, yeah. I mean, I think your guys' advice is very, very correct. I don't disagree with anything you've said. I think I only covered COVID once. There was a video I did, and it was basically asking the question, is COVID making us all act more Muslim? The video is actually on YouTube still. And it did very, very well at the time, but that was very early on when we didn't actually, have a lot of hindsight on COVID. So obviously follow government advice, but also, Islam tells us, to emphasize hygiene and stay in family groups and all that type of stuff. So there you go. So also make sure you're practicing Islam, and reading the Quran helps to deal with any stress and concerns, definitely, that you might get in this COVID era where it's all doom and gloom. That helped me very much so when I was dealing with the lockdown and the fear that was being pumped into us that, COVID's here, people are dying everywhere. I turned to the Quran, and alhamdulillah, it helped get me through the first lockdown.
Let's stick with you, Robert, because you were a member of the Labour Party, right? And this was another one of the major stories in Britain over 2021. Muslims basically deserting the Labour Party. And you and me went up to Batley in Spain, where there was a huge Muslim vote for George Galloway. I mean, let's leave aside the merits of George Galloway, but basically it was a Muslim protest vote against Labour for George Galloway. What are your feelings? You happy that Muslims are finally abandoning this wretched party?
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't think there should be any British Muslims in the Labour Party as members or whatever, and they certainly shouldn't be voting for it at all. And I'm not saying it because, you know, I'm advocating for the Conservative Party. Absolutely not. I was brought up on the policy of, you know, you'd rather be dead than vote Conservative. But basically, look, the Labour Party is just as bad, if not worse, than the Conservative Party on many, many key issues. And what's happening now under the current leader is that they're actually engaging in a deeply Islamophobic, anti-Palestine purge of the party. And they're targeting all sorts of people. We're talking about black membership, Muslim membership, Palestinian membership. The Jewish membership actually is being purged under Starmer. This is the left-wing, socialist, pro-Palestine Jewish membership. They've been deeply targeted over the past year, and that's a massive story on its own, something which I've been keeping my eye on very closely. So the Labour Party is a disgrace. It's a total joke, and I was really excited at the prospect of Muslims in Batley going against the party, and they did. Unfortunately, they didn't actually secure a win, and I think that the candidate that they were backing as well, the independent, he was a Respect Party candidate, George Galloway. Again, you know, George Galloway isn't everyone's cup of tea, right? But I would have loved to have seen Labour lose, and it was only Liar Leadbeater, I like to call her, absolute Liar Leadbeater, who managed to claw her way into office on the back of lies and smears, and that's typical Labour Party. But I'm keeping my eye on Batley, and I'll be happy to go back, or any other constituency that has a significant Muslim electorate, and I would be keeping an eye on them, and I would love to see a peaceful political revolution of British Muslims in this country. Definitely, let's go it alone, do our own thing, and make a stand against these institutionally Islamophobic mainstream parties.
Yeah, I love it how you prefaced revolution with peaceful. That's what Muslims have to do these days, don't we? Because
peaceful revolution.
Yeah, peaceful revolution, guys, by the way. Just a reminder.
Listen, I just want to address this question. Mohammed Qureshi is saying GB News frequently questions the official narrative on COVID. They have not been banned by Ofcom or YouTube. Yeah, that's true, but they're white people. They're not Muslims. They're not Muslims. We get treated differently. You should see the amount of violations we've got, brothers and sisters, on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, whatever, for nothing, for doing nothing whatsoever. Okay, they treat us differently. So GB News is protected. We're not protected.
I just want to add to that. Today, I was going through some of our pages' violations, and about 25 of them, just on 2021 alone, Roshan, were simple, basic things like mentioning Taliban, mentioning Hamas, mentioning Tahrik al-Labbaik Pakistan, posting a picture of Sheikh Khadim Rizvi, rahimahullah. Things which normal media outlets, or even outlets like Al Jazeera, Middle East Eye, wouldn't get penalized for it. We do. We always get violations for doing the most basic, simple things which other outlets do. So it's not that we don't want to host debates about vaccines. It's not that we don't want to have these conversations. It's a twofold issue. The first thing is censorship and closure. So we have to protect the platform, which is a greater thing than having a debate about vaccine. And number two is trying to calculate and assess that this type of debate, will it have real life repercussions on people who decide not to take the vaccine based on a show or a debate that we host? So yes, GB News and others have these conversations, and they question the official narrative. We would love to do that, or at least we'd love to have a conversation to have that, but it's not a level playing field. We will just get censored and shut down, and before you know it, there'll be no 5 pillars left. The Kate Shemarani podcast that I did, I did with Kate Shemarani, on that YouTube, it doesn't even have a title. It says read description, because that video kept getting taken down. So
okay,
I know
Dilly, Dilly, shall we conclude by dancing on the grave of the Quilliam Foundation? Your
Of
thoughts?
course, one of the best news that we had this year was the erasure, the closure, the finishing of the group known as the Quilliam Foundation, a bunch of pro-government, anti-Muslim, anti-Islam charlatans. Alhamdulillah, they came to an end with their millions and millions of pounds of funding from the government and anti-Islam and anti-Muslim organizations, and yet the organizations, the figures, the institutions that they attacked and made literally careers, lucrative careers, alhamdulillah, they are standing today with the support of the community, with continued financial backing. And by we, I'm not just talking about 5 pillars, I'm talking about every Muslim organization and figure that was witch hunted publicly and privately by this organization, by the likes of Majid Nawaz, Osama Hassan, Adam Dean, and all the other shayateen that were involved with this organization. Alhamdulillah, it was the best news to see that the inevitable end of such an organization was this year, as was the removal, or we don't even know, where is Sarah Khan? Where is the czar, the extremism czar? Where is she? Who's taken her job? So I think that the end of Quilliam was a beautiful piece of news for this year, because you always synonymize Quilliam with whatever attack that's going to come against Islam and Muslims from the government via brand faces with Muslim names, which is Quilliam Foundation.
I mean, yeah, I've got nothing to add to that. Robert, any final thoughts on anything whatsoever? What are you looking forward to in 2022?
Well, basically, I think 5 pillars need to go on the attack, to be honest. I think you need to 5 pillar a few more people. GB News, definitely. You've got to get onto GB News and have a go, because they've got some presenters on there that are asking for it. Absolutely asking for it. They need a 5 pillar taking down, definitely.
Well, we are, as Dilly will tell you, we are kind of excluded from mainstream media. We used to appear a lot on the BBC, Sky, different platforms, but we're on a blacklist. But GB News have contacted me a few times, and for whatever reason, I've not been able to do it. So that is, perhaps you'll be seeing me and Dilly on GB News soon.
I mean, let me just say something to our listeners and our viewers, our donors, our supporters who have been messaging saying we want to see you guys more on mainstream shows. Brothers and sisters, there was a time for the best part of 4 years, me and Roshan and other Muslim figures, we enjoyed a lot of platform time. Roshan's been on Andrew Neil's show with Melanie Phillips. He's been on very major shows, as I have been as well. But I think 2019, with the appointment of Sarah Khan, we are not saying definitively, conclusively that she was single-handedly behind this, but we are very confident, we've got a hunch that this individual, along with others, were involved in providing the mainstream media with a list of Muslim organizations and figures and spokespeople who they did no longer wanted platform. Because after my last appearance with Piers Morgan on Good Morning Britain, which was March 2019, we've not been contacted by anyone. Because, or else our inbox was filled with media requests from CNN, from Sky News, from BBC, from ITV, you name it. We used to always get daily invites. It's literally pin drop silence. And it happened in 2019 when Sarah Khan became the extremism czar. Not saying that she was single-handedly behind it, but we know that she was having conversations with Impress. We know that she was having conversations with Muslim Islamic institutions up and down the country about not platforming 5 pillars and Cage and others. So, you know, it wouldn't come as a surprise if a list has been handed over to the likes of Sky and BBC and others, to producers and senior producers, and said, right, these people shouldn't be given a platform.
Okay, Robert, I think Dilly and me are going to conclude. So we're going to say salam alaikum to you. Appreciate you coming on today. Apologies for the insults at the beginning. And yeah.
No, I'm used to it. No, that's fine. That's what 5 pillars need to come on here for.
I should say to you, brothers and sisters, that Robert does actually do a lot of work for 5 Pillars, freelance work. He's done some wicked. I sound like a kid. He's done some good exposés, even if he doesn't put the name to all the stories, because he's afraid of taking the backlash and responsibility for his words.
Well, everyone already assumes that I'm like an undercover MI5 guy. So yeah, I'm just kind of fulfilling that.
Everyone thinks you're CIA, don't they? Everything thinks you're like a wide breather at CIA.
But the white convert new Muslim experience wouldn't be complete without an accusation of being.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, definitely. No, but thanks for having me, guys. It's been a real pleasure. A great show as always. Yeah, I look forward to next year watching all your coverage, inshallah. And yeah, I pray for your success, inshallah, because yeah, like has been said by others on the show, I think Five Pillars is very unique, very needed in the community. And yeah, of course, all the viewership as well. Please keep supporting this platform, because without Five Pillars, what else is there?
Okay, assalamu alaikum, Robert. Okay, let's wrap up. Shall I read out a few comments or not? There's so many coming in.
No, go for it. Read out some comments.
Have you got to go, Dilly?
No, I'm not in a rush.
Let's read out a few comments then, because
let's read out some comments.
I mean, brothers and sisters, I've missed out so many comments here. They've been like thousands of them are consistently coming in. I'm missing out most of them, but let me go towards the end, the last 5 minutes or so, and read out a few of them at least. So Adam Arshad says, I disagree with lockdown, although I am vaccinated. Bring back the caliphate. Going with Bill Gates is not the way to go, bro. We're going to get shut down for that comment alone. Turkey is allying itself with NATO. What? It's a member of NATO.
It's a member of NATO, yeah.
Mashallah, Roshan, just want to say well done. All you're working on. And also Dilly, love the Afghanistan videos and the podcast where Roshan was straight up no beating about the bush. Jazakallah khair. Appreciate those words. That's what keeps us going. Sorry, let me look for a good comment.
Hey, someone called me miserable. I was really...
Yeah. Wait. Here. What's going on with Dilly?
Miserable instead of engaging. What?
Me, yeah, but not Dilly.
Yeah, that's Russia. That's not me.
People saying the same thing, so I'm just going to skip through there.
What? That I'm looking miserable.
I mean, there's certainly a right-wing channel.
Yeah, very right-wing.
But they're right-wing, but they're kind of pro-freedom of speech, and they will get people on. Whereas the BBC, they pretend to be neutral, but they ban people, you know?
I think GB News comes from, they would present themselves as principled right-wingers, principled conservatives.
Which we can handle. We'll debate with these people.
Yeah, it's not a problem. Like we're not as crazy as the EDL and UKIP types, but we're right-wing enough to not like your religion, but also to have it out with you guys. So I think, yeah, it's like kind of liberal.
I didn't know 5 Pillars are reluctant on vaccinations. Well, we've addressed that, haven't we? We've addressed that already.
No, we're not reluctant. It's
not really. We've said our own kind of.
It's just a topic of conversation which we've not prioritized as something which is affecting the Muslim community on the list of priorities. And I think that's something which our readers, our viewers in the Muslim community have to respect, because every single Muslim organization and group have their list of priorities of what they think is the most pressing issue that needs to be addressed, respectively according to their expertise and their output. And ours, when it comes to covering news on a daily basis, questions and skepticism around vaccinations isn't there on the priority list. That's basically what it is.
Muslims totally reliant on Zionist controlled social media platforms. Yeah, and the infrastructure is certainly, that's our weak point, isn't it? Even though we're on these social media platforms, the infrastructure is controlled by Americans and Zionists, and it's definitely our weak point. I think we have to address it at some point, but I haven't really got the answers.
I think Muslims have the numbers and have the money for a viable alternative. I think we just love what's already here. We love Facebook.
I think I disagree slightly, because there was never a reason to leave Facebook in the early days, but now there's a reason, because they're censoring, and so are other platforms. And I think Muslims are annoyed at that. Not Muslims, loads of non-Muslims as well. And I think if there was a, let's say if there was a viable Muslim social media platform backed by huge scholars, backed by huge organizations, I think millions of people would get behind that, and it would grow. And yeah, it would take years to become Facebook or whatever. Maybe it would never become Facebook, but it would be something for us. It would belong to us. We'd be in the driving seat. At the moment, we're at the mercy of these people, and they can turn the lights off whenever they want.
Do you know what? You know one thing I've never understood, Roshan? This is the truth. Demographically, Muslims who are public speakers or du'at or like YouTubers or influencers or public speakers like ourselves, whatever it may be, we don't actually demographically need the numbers or the reliance from non-Muslim viewership, because there's so many Muslims. we're literally like a quarter of mankind, right? So we have enough numbers to prop up any platform. We have the funding available, but I don't know what it is. I think we just love what's mainstream and Western because
and we're totally divided. So we can't get our act together.
Because if you think about it, Roshan, right? So many Islamic Bank of Britain, now Al Rayan, they tried competing with the mainstream banks. They only ended up imitating the mainstream banks, right? One or two Islamic channels, English language Islamic channels that come on Sky, they've tried to produce some alternative content that will compete with the mainstream, but there's something about the MSM that we love.
Yeah. Should we conclude on this comment, Dilly? Shall I go first?
Yeah,
in terms of 2022 for 5 pillars for us, I mean, I really want to go back to Afghanistan, and I've got a 6-month multi-entry visa. I've got a year-long work permit. This is gold dust, and it's really hard to get. So I think I should go back, inshallah, maybe around Ramadan time or something like that. I also want to go to the World Cup in December. It's going to be the first World Cup in the Muslim world. We've got to be there. Surely we've got to be there. And I also think we should be at the French presidential elections in April, simply because that country is turning into a fascist state. And I want to be there to support my Muslim brothers and sisters. So this is my wish list. This is my dream list. Obviously, we did that survey, didn't we, a few months ago? And it was great reading those comments. You know, our readers, I mean, they love us, don't they? They do. And they support. And just reading those comments, you know, gave me a lot of motivation to continue. It really was like fuel. But at the same time, they said, you've got to be bigger. You know, you're too small and you're not reaching enough people. Some of that is out of our control if we get banned by different platforms. But I just want 5 pillars to be much bigger. I want to hire more people, reach more people, and I want to do those foreign trips.
And I don't think those deliverables which you mentioned is even like a dream list. I think you can very much fulfill all of those things, inshallah. For me, 2022 is a very important year because we've got Ramadan just over 100 days away. So very important from a fundraising point of view. We are approaching the 100th episode of season 2 of Blood Brothers podcast. Will there be a season 3? Will there be a new platform? Who knows? I don't know. I'd like to continue a podcast, but will it continue under the Blood Brothers platform? I don't know. I will also be accompanying One Ummah, our charity partners, to 2 aid trips. One, hopefully, inshallah, to the Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, and another one to Lebanon or to Turkey, to the Turkish-Syrian border. In terms of international deployments, I would like to definitely accompany Roshan on one of his assignments, because one of the things which you all fed back to us was that you want to see me and Roshan on these assignments together. And Afghanistan was supposed to be us.
It'd be good to go to Afghanistan. I mean, I don't mind being in the background or even being your cameraman and your editor. Because I like that kind of stuff as well. I don't always need to be in front of the camera. So if we went to Afghanistan together, you know, you could do the on-screen stuff, and I'd happily do the behind-the-scenes stuff. I would. I don't need to be in front of the camera. Yeah.
Well, why do you say? Do you think I need to be in front of the camera?
Yeah, definitely. You do. You know. No, but also I think you love it. You love it, and you're good at it as well. So
anyway, listen. No, so those are my few things. Getting to the 100th milestone episode. To the Blood Brothers podcast. Number 2, accompany Roshan on at least one assignment. And number 3, inshallah, 2 aid deployments with One Ummah to Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, and or the Turkish-Syrian border, inshallah.
Okay, let's finish off really quickly. 5 pillars will dominate the UK one day, inshallah. World Cup, are you kidding me? Yeah, man, it's the World Cup, the biggest sports tournament in the world, and it's happening in a Muslim country. We've got to be there. What do you think of Marine Le Pen losing to Eric? Well, I think obviously France is drifting to the right. I think Emmanuel Macron will win, but he's stealing the right's clothes. But I think the margin of victory is going to be much smaller than it was in the past. But they're all fascists at the end of the day. 5 Pillars should open an office in Turkey. Well, not just Turkey, many other places, inshallah. Thank you for covering beautiful Afghanistan. We should have what is the USHUB? I've got no idea what that is. I'm sorry. Can't answer that question. Do you know what it is?
We'll look into that.
I'm just reading out all the comments that praise me, Dilly. I'm ignoring the ones that praise you.
Okay.
Jazakallah khair, Abu Yusuf. And getting towards the end now. Actually, I won't read out anymore. So that's it. So I think we'll wrap up, Dilly. Any final words, or are you all out of words?
No, just want to tell our readers and our viewers and our listeners, our supporters, our well-wishers, brothers and sisters who like our content, who read our content, who watch our content, those of you who don't necessarily agree with everything that we post or say, it is with your du'as and your continued support, and of course, first and foremost, with the permission of Allah, that we are still here 8 years later, approaching 9 years. It is through your du'as, your generosity, your donations, you sharing our content, you forwarding our content. It is through all of this collective effort that we are here today, stronger than ever before. So we need you to carry on supporting us, inshallah, to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah keeps myself and Roshan and the team sincere and steadfast upon what's most pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal. Ameen. And generally, for you guys to keep us on the straight and narrow as well. At the end of the day, your feedback, your support, your constructive criticism is as important as your words of praise and your du'as as well. So yeah, just love and respect to all the support and du'as over the years, especially 2021, and that we hope that that support network and that support base increases and grows in the years to come, inshallah.
Okay, perfect ending. I won't add to that. So see you all, brothers and sisters, in 2022. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters.